Today is Monday, March 25th. I'm on the phone with Ranting Andy Hoffman. So much has happened over the weekend, but if you've been listening to us, none of it, and I mean none of it, should surprise you. And again, it's Monday. Gold is getting raided. The euro's getting killed. French banks are going to their intrinsic value, which is the same intrinsic value of every bank in the world, which is zero. Andy, how are you?
Good, but gold is no longer being rated because silver is up 15 cents and gold is just down $1 because they're playing my favorite game, DLITG, or Don't Let It Turn Green, as we watch.
Yeah, and this Cyprus deal turned out to be worse than the initial deal, didn't it?
Yeah, just to give people, just to show you how the spin works. And again, my biggest point last week when all this Cyprus stuff hit was that, this three legs of the manipulation stool, whatever you want to call it, this propaganda, money printing and market manipulation. And I said that once this Cyprus proposal broke last weekend, the propaganda leg is permanently broken, meaning people will no longer trust anything that the EU says or the Fed says about saving the economy and saving the euro because they lied when they came in and said we're going to be stealing people's money. And going into the weekend, they did a nice job pushing stocks back up and trying to make people think things were better just by doubling their efforts to take stocks up. So over the weekend, they announced an even worse deal than last week. Remember, last weekend, they said we're going to take 7 to 10% of people's deposits, and the markets freaked and gold took off. Now they said, okay, if you're under 100,000 euros in your deposit, you're okay. But if you're over 100,000 euros in your deposit, we're taking between 40 and 100% of your money. And for those of people who do have less than 100,000, there's now capital controls, so you can't take your money out even if you wanted to. And then the head of the Euro finance ministers followed that up this morning by saying this is a template for the EU. And as you said, the European stocks turned around and they are collapsing, or they collapsed at the close, particularly the banks, particularly the French banks with all their Greek exposure. This is the worst case scenario. And that's why I'm rambling on so long, because this is going to cause a major bank run across all of Europe in the coming months.
Yeah, and there was an article today in the Market Oracle, which basically said that England doesn't have to worry because they could just print the money up. Whatever anybody wants to pull out of the bank, they'll just print. So therefore, the end result is the same. You wind up with nothing because you wind up with hyperinflated pounds. And the same thing, I wrote a piece last week, Andy. We don't have to worry about bank runs in the U.S. The reason being that Helicopter Ben is going to print up anything that's necessary. So the fact is that whatever happens, they're just going to keep printing and printing. So one way or the other, your money gets stolen, either through outright confiscation, like in Cyprus, or through hyperinflation, which is going to sweep Europe and the United States.
Actually, in Cyprus, they'll get the best of both worlds because all the money that's being printed for these, they're still printing money for the bailouts, and of course, now what's left of the Cyprus banking system is going to be shunned by the rest of the world. So they're going to see a drop in their standard of living big time because of all that's going on. They're going to see inflation over there as well. The UK, you mean the UK that Fitch just said they're going to be downgrading them shortly from their AAA status on Friday?
That's the one I was referring to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the UK, I just wrote a piece a few weeks ago called Last Breaths of the Dying Empire. I mean, they are dead and buried. They are an embarrassment to the world. They have wreaked more destruction on the planet than any country in history. And it's just disgusting, that they have essentially set the template for the EU. And now they are suffering the worst inflation in Europe and among the worst recessions. And it's so bad what's going on there, and this Cyprus deal seals it. And I truly believe I can't underestimate enough. I mean, I have just some money in Schwab. I've told people that's the only place I keep it. I've been taking my money out of Schwab in the past week, and that's Schwab because I think everyone's going to do it. People who have over 100,000 euros in accounts anywhere. Are you kidding me? I don't care if you're in Germany. People are going to be taking that money out of the system, bringing it to their house, buying gold. Finding any safe havens they can, of which there are none left. Heck, look at Switzerland. Now they're talking about more giving up tax cheats to the U.S. government. Viamet won't even take metal from U.S. customers anymore. There is only one safe haven, or two, I should say, your own house and gold and silver.
In your own pocket.
In your own pocket.
Hey, well, maybe you could buy gift cards, take your money out of the system and buy gift cards to a supermarket. I mean, I don't know what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, except they'll run out of supplies when the inflation gets bad enough. And again, I'm no fear monger. I've never been that way, neither have you. I've just been telling it the way it is for so many years. And I'm screaming right now because this Cyprus deal is, there's a reason why all of us people in our camp are calling this, I've been calling it the financial 9/11. Jim Sinclair calls it the most important financial event, one of the most important financial events in history. It is because the confidence is lost that your money is safe in a bank. And I've been screaming this since 2008, and no one's been listening. But I guarantee you they're going to be listening in Europe right now.
Hey, you know what this reminds me of? Do you remember that show, The Beverly Hillbillies?
I remember it. It was a little before my time. I know it.
You caught the reruns. You caught the reruns. I caught the live ones. So Mr. Drysdale, he owned the bank in Beverly Hills. And every time Jeb got upset, he was going to take his money out of the bank, Mr. Drysdale was ready to jump out of a window because he knew there would be a bank run and he would be ruined. And right now, I think the entire banking system is a bunch of Mr. Drysdales just waiting for Jeb Clampett to put the knife down, to stick the knife into his ribs. And what about Putin and the Russians' reaction, since basically the wealthy Russians are losing between 40% and everything? I mean, this is the stuff that wars are made of.
Yeah, well, here's the quote that I put in my piece today from Putin. It said, "It would have been better to put the German flag at the presidential palace in Cyprus. Do you not understand that this decision will destroy your country? The Russians lost in a day up to 3.5 billion euros. Trust towards Cyprus as a safe place for placing money will be reduced to zero." That's from Putin himself this weekend. And, my point is this. Anyone who's got more than 100,000 euros in a bank is going to be moving that money. I don't care who you are, how much you ignore, what's going on in the world. Everyone will know that this was sanctioned, not just sanctioned, this was mandated.
It was the plan
by the European leaders that if you have more than 100,000 euros in your account, you're screwed. In fact, they tried to initially, as we know, try to do it for everybody, but the parliament voted no. And by the way, what I wrote today, which will be out later, was the most appalling part of this thing was how they, this Nikos, whatever, Andrios, the Cyprus guy, he goes to, he's only been around a month. He goes to Brussels to negotiate overnight. And because the initial deal was voted down 36-0 by their parliament, they changed the wording of this. So it's no longer called a tax. It's called a, who knows what, whatever they call it. So it no longer has to be voted on by the parliament. Because believe me, the parliament would have voted no on this one too. And I said, this would be no different than remember that first TARP vote in September of 2008 where they voted no in the House? Yeah. It was a big deal. Mm-hmm. What if Paulson got together with George Bush, just the two of them, and said, we're going to change the wording so that Congress doesn't have to vote on the second edition? Because that's basically what they just did. Yeah. They just show that there is no democracy in Europe.
There's no law. There's no law.
No, there's no law, there's no regulations, there's no deposit insurance. And now, as you said, there's capital controls. So even the people that have money don't really have money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the numbers are there when you go online, you will see your account balance, but, you can take it out at the rate of 100 euros per day, which means in 3 years, if you have 100,000 euros, you'll be able to take all your money out. Well, in 3 years, it's going to be you're going to be a day late and a euro short on the whole thing. And obviously what we're seeing is huge capital flows taking place right now to the U.S., which means that the Fed is sending billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars over to the European banking system as we are speaking, because otherwise it would have collapsed already and the dollar would have gone up to 1 euro. It would have gone to parity at this point.
Of course they are. They've sent over overtly $300+ billion in the first 3 months of this year, and that was before there was a crisis. There was no crisis in the first 3 months of the year. Yes, the European economies have been doing terrible, and as we speak, they're literally all, including Germany, all the way down to Greece, at their literal low point. But there was no, quote, crisis. This is a major, major crisis. So we're talking about there could be 300 billion going over tomorrow. I'm looking at my screen here. Here's Credit Agricole, which, by the way, in 2011-12, I was calling it the most likely to be the first big one to collapse. Down 9% today, down 9% on Thursday, down 9% Tuesday. Here's SocGen, down 9%, Paribas down 6%. I'm telling you, these French banks are the most overexposed to bad debt on the planet. And Greece is going to go next. They need more money right now. They're negotiating a new bailout. Who on earth is going to be? You think the ECB is going to say the same thing now for them? We want to take 10% of your money, or 50%, or 100% of your money. The whole thing is done in Greece, and it's going to spread to France, and it's going to spread to Spain, and it's going to spread to Italy. You took it out of my mouth. We just voted against the EU in their latest election. It's going to all do it this year. There's no doubt in my mind.
And it's all going to break up because the people have had enough, because their unelected masters in Brussels, are calling the shots here, and they're done. They just don't want to know about it. And I don't know if it's going to be for the better or for the worse. They'll probably allow people to still go from country to country without a passport, without checkpoints. But as far as money goes, it's going to go back to the same national currencies as before the euro, and this is a real setback for pan-Europeanism.
It's only 14 years old. I mean, people talk about Europe, about this Euro Union like it's so solid, because they think because France and Germany are old countries that there's no union. There is no region on the planet that has more of a history of war and hatred than Europe. They've got 25 countries with 25 languages, 25 cultures, wars, deep-seated hatreds that go back for centuries. They've had this stupid currency thing going for 14 years. It's been the biggest disaster ever. In fact, it came out in 1999 just as the world was peaking because they forced it into being. And now it's become the biggest bastard basket case in the entire world. And, Cyprus, I guarantee you that Greece in the next few months completely collapses. And with it, who knows what comes next.
Yeah, which means if you haven't bought gold and silver yet, you better do it, because you got to become your own central bank. You have to opt out of the system, keep the amount of money that you need to do your business, pay your rent or mortgage, whatever, but just be prepared, because it's one world now, and what happens in Europe happens in the U.S., happens all over. And it just amazes me how kind of complacent Putin has been over this whole thing. Yeah, he's been making noises, but I don't see him doing a whole heck of a lot, at least not front and center.
Hey, this is just day one. And remember, first of all, that quote that I gave you is a pretty strong quote. And this is a guy who was the head of the KGB. He's probably the cagiest, shrewdest, and possibly most vicious ruler out there in the world. And he's also very rich and hates the West, particularly Americans, more than anyone on earth. He's taken that crown now that Hugo Chavez is dead. And trust me, whatever he does, he's not necessarily going to do it loudly.
Yeah, here's this article I was telling you about by Nadim Waliyat. Cyprus shows your savings will be stolen. UK theft is by means of high inflation. And he might as well have said American theft is by means of high inflation. And, if you're not worried about this, just go back to your American Idol or whatever, The Great Race, and don't worry about it. Road trip.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, the only reason the UK and the US can do it that way is because they've been high up on the totem pole. They've had, they have more of their currency out in circulation and, as reserve currencies and all. But the fact is that the cancer will go up the pole to the top, and it's already basically reached the UK. I mean, they were a shadow of what they once were, and they're going to fall apart far before the United States is. But ultimately, it'll go up to the brain and destroy the brain, which is in Washington.
No doubt. And on that note, Andy, milesfranklin.com. Sign up for Andy's daily newsletter. It's chock full of information that you're just not going to get. Because one other thing, Andy, it's finally hit the mainstream media here, what's going on in Cyprus. But have you ever seen a case of greater journalistic malpractice or ignorance or just total brain deadness?
I saw an article today in Zero Hedge where it showed the amount of articles on Cyprus compared to other major stories out there. And it's, I've been writing for WeCat. I've never seen, at least since Miles Franklin, any kind of story get this much coverage. But you're right. So much of it is just, off the charts. But I will say, and I'm going to highlight it today, now that the reactors in the mainstream media see what the markets have done in the last few hours, the top story on Yahoo Finance as we speak is extremely, it's called Banks in Europe May Now Seize Deposits to Cover Their Gambling Losses. This is the mainstream right now. And, we know they're reactive. And when they see things going down or gold going up, you bet they're going to start talking about it.
Yeah, they kind of don't have a choice, but they've misdiagnosed the entire problem.
Of course.
They don't, they never get to the basis, which is unsound money and the ability to just create infinite currency units through quantitative easing and through credit expansion and fractional reserve banking. So if you never really talk about that, then you're just dealing with pure, total ignorance. And that's what our media excels at, is spreading ignorance and lies.
But the whole point is, and that's why, we're talking about the cartel playing DLITG with GLD as we speak here, because as soon as gold goes up, that's what the mainstream is going to talk about. And that's why they're so fearful.
Yeah.
For instance, what I call cartel rule number 1, thou shalt never allow PMs to surge plunges. It's that simple. There's such a fine line between the mainstream media completely going 180 and started talking about why everyone should own gold and why the banks are falling apart. And that's why they're so desperate to prevent these things from happening, which they always do and they always will. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I think that the ability to lock gold and silver into that channel, it's probably just about at an end, another few weeks at the most. They're just not going to be able to do it because, like you said, they've just created millions, maybe hundreds of millions of new gold consumers in Europe and around the world. And,
and I'll finish on that topic again. People may not want to listen to what my view is about near term, because I don't give a near term view. I certainly have made it clear that I think 2013, you're going to see massive dislocations in economies. But when it comes to gold, there's a reason why Jim Sinclair just had 1,000 people to a meeting in New York and why he's now soliciting meetings in London, Dubai.
Yeah, all over the place.
He is screaming. The next phase of the PM market is starting now, and I mean now, and we are going to be surging forward in the coming months because the end game has been started. And he said he believes that what's happened in Cyprus is the end game.
Yeah, I'm wholeheartedly with him and you on that score. So milesfranklin.com, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Make sure, if you haven't done it already, go listen to last Sunday's emergency report, because everything is falling into place exactly the way Andy and I discussed. And then our usual Monday segment, check that out as well. And then go back and listen to this one, because your future, your financial future, your family's future, everything in your life is being determined right now. And you either are going to play an active role in it and you're going to help decide your own fate, or you're going to be one of the masses who are online, just like in that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Running Man, having food riots and worrying about black helicopters shooting at you when you're trying to get your food. And I'm dead serious about that, Andy, and I'm not fear-mongering, because it is what it is, but that's what we're heading towards.
I couldn't agree more.
All right, till next week.
All right, take it easy, Kerry.
You too.